So I want you to, I'm going to write it in the chat, I want you to go and look for, go into one of your search engines, Google or Chrome or whatever, and go to menti.com. So if you do that on your phones, and I will open up the screen to show you what it should look like. So when you find menti.com, you should, on your phones, find a page that looks something like this. Again, give me a wave or signal that you have found that. Good, hands up. Yeah. I've got to scroll through all your pictures because you're not all on the screen at once. Good. Okay, so everyone's found that. So if you found menti.com, again, I'm showing you on the screen, it should look something like this. I'm now going to give you the code to write into that little window that's on the front of your screen. So I'm just going to pop out of sharing for the moment so I can write it in the chat in case there's any misunderstandings on it. So the code you're going to type into the page is 560332. 560332. That should then take you into Mentimeter itself, into the Mentimeter that I've created. And again, I'm going to just scroll down and you should see, hopefully, if we've done it correctly, you should see a page that looks something like that. What are your expectations for this course? Okay, and we've created some possible answers that you might like to give on this occasion. So you have two options. You're allowed two choices. So you can choose from 2 of the 5 options that are presented to you there. So if you go ahead, have a think about that, and I will show you. Sorry,
Carol, can you repeat once more this code?
I've written it in the chat. It's 560332. If you look on the chat, I've written it in there too, just in case you sometimes people can't hear so well. 560332 should bring you to this page and select your 2 options. I just have to come out for a moment and go back in and show you what will happen next. Hopefully. Just got to find the right page on my share screen. Everybody finding they're able to do that okay?
Yes, I found it.
Good, excellent. I have to open up a web page first, so just give me a second to do that. Wow, I can see your answers live, and I'm hopefully just about to show them to you. So I just need to go back into share screen. Here we are. So hopefully you can see live the answers that you're giving. So 11 people have answered so far. And networking at the moment is ahead with 7 answers. Learning something new, 6. Be inspired, 5. 3. Nobody wants to have a good time. That's a bit. Come on.
That's also allowed.
So hopefully, I mean, obviously unfortunately I wasn't able to open the screen fast enough to let you see this happening live, but the bars will start to move as people respond to the questions. Just as an aside, for those of you who are Europart members, and for those of you who are not, it's also an interesting piece of information. One of the fundamental values, fundamental principles of the Europart Federation is to have fun. So having a good time is a good thing. If you're having fun whilst you're learning, that's better learning. So, and hopefully throughout the course we will try and make it as a fun and good experience as possible for you. Has everyone voted? Made their 2 options? Okay. So again, this is a very useful little tool that you can use in a variety of different ways, and we're going to have some other opportunities to use it this morning. So there you can see your expectations for this course. Oh, someone's finally decided they're going to have a good time while they're doing it. Great. So getting new contacts and networking is, you know, thank goodness, a very important element of this course. And it's, again, one of those fundamentals that why Europark exists. So we're very pleased that that's something that you're aiming to achieve through being present on this course. I hope we'll be able to give you some inspiration, but I hope you'll be able to inspire each other too. And of course, we all hope that we're going to learn something new together throughout this process. So again, I'll put these results on the Moodle at the end of the session this morning, so you'll be able to just remind yourself of that. And it'll be interesting to see as the course goes on if we meet your expectations, or if you meet your expectations of each other. And just on that, new contacts and networking, that is something that you need to take a certain responsibility for. And the Moodle is there for you to interact with each other, to put your information on the Moodle so that others can read and share it. And we have opened up the forum, which puts some of the questions that we discussed on Monday there for you to respond to, for you to put your ideas in, for you to put your comments and experiences in, again, so that your colleagues can read that and you can start an exchange and some networking experiences between you. So that those tools are there to enable you to do that, to meet that expectation that that you've identified here in this little experiment. So that was just your first little, that was just your test. That was your dry run of Mentimeter. We're going to do something more with it shortly. But first, I just want to take you through just a basic introduction to communication now. Somebody's got their microphone on, so I just need to remind you to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. It's just easier for everyone. So again, sit back. Oh no, I think yes, are we, yeah, we need to show the video first. Yeah, is that right now? Yeah. So sit back. You have, as we did on Monday, we're going to make a pause so that we can come out of the Zoom. Don't leave, but we're not going to be engaged across the Zoom platform, in order for us to just go back into the Moodle and take a look at the introductory video to communicating with purpose. As we did on Monday, we need you to go into the Moodle and open up the link to the video that's there. It should only take a couple of minutes of viewing, and then we'll come back together in the Zoom room to continue our conversation. So if you'd like to do that now, we'll just take a pause, and we'll hear your comments on the video once we come back into the room. So if you could all go to the Moodle, click on the link for the video, first one, yes, Dima. What's exactly called, Neil?
I'm just putting the message in the chat. So it's the video under 2.2, and it's called Defining Your Messages. Exactly, FICO, yeah.
You may recognize some people in the video. Again, can you just signal to me when you've finished viewing it, so I know that everyone's seen it? Good. Iron brew. I bought line brew. Neil, maybe I can hand over to you to explain a little bit about what that video is all about.
Well, the first thing I maybe should say is that Carol and I had such a laugh when we were preparing this, and our colleagues in the other part of the Life Edu team, Teresa, Barbara and Fernando, were bemused, I think. Carol and I grew up about 10 miles apart in Scotland, so we have a very common language. We have a shared history as well in terms of our culture and our points of reference. So you should see some of the exchanges that Carol and I type via Skype, which is in our own language, Scots. So the point of this video was just basically to say, you know, when you're speaking with people, it's easier sometimes to be able to strike up a relationship with someone, especially when you can speak in the language and use the vocabulary and the points of references that are familiar and common to you both. And that is something which we'll pick up on in the other modules as well, using appropriate language for appropriate audiences. So I hope you all enjoyed our little messages. I should perhaps translate. Messages in Scots is basically shopping. So if you're going to do your messages, you're going to go to the shops to buy some provisions. But it sounds much nicer in Scots.
Yeah, we'll provide subtitles for the beginning of the video later on. But the point being is, for us, for Neil and I to say, I'm going for my messages, it makes perfect sense to us. But of course, when we're talking about messages in our communication module, we are, of course, talking about the stories, the information, what it is we want to transmit to other people, not necessarily their shopping lists. So, yeah, we can always... we need to be able to understand each other's language. So that brings us on to communicating with purpose. So again, we sit back for a few minutes. I'm just going to take you through a very quick PowerPoint presentation just to introduce this topic to us. And this will again be the baseline for everything else that's going to come in the next few weeks. And again, forgive me if I'm peering at the screen. It's just that when I go to share screen, the windows are this size and I have to try and look to see which window I want to open.
You just need glasses.
Well, I don't think I think binoculars is what I need. Okay, I hope this is the right one. Purpose of communication. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So again, as we did yesterday, the PowerPoints will be made available to you at the end of the lesson, so you'll be able to go back and review what I've said. So, communicating with purpose. What is the purpose of communication? So, have you heard what I think I've said? So, for many of us, communication is often about miscommunication. And as you saw from the video just a few minutes ago, if we hadn't explained to you what messages were, you really wouldn't have had a clue what we were talking about. What is communication? Well, it's a noun. It means the exchange of information, ideas and feelings, and that's important because it's not just spoken words or written words or reading words. You know, we are communicating all the time. Even just by sitting looking at each other, we are communicating something. I think it's as much an art as a science. We intuitively start communicating from the day we're born, really, and we need to learn how to be more effective in our communication, and particularly as we're understanding this in a professional capacity, in our working situation. So what is effective communication? As I say, we're communicating all the time, but we're actually being effective. Are we actually getting our messages across? Because obviously we think that we are giving out messages all the time. We're trying to say something, we're trying to convey a message, and we assume that people are understanding us, are hearing what we have to say, and they will act according to the information we give them. But the reality is often something different. We try to get our message across, we try to shout louder or use different words, and yet again, our person who we're speaking to or to our audience, the reality is the information is maybe a bit unclear, or it doesn't come out completely. It's incomplete, and the understanding in terms of what you had intended in your communication has not been effective. Because there are many influences as to how that effective communication can be more effective, and of course obstacles that get in our way. I have to keep moving us around so I can see my slides. So what are those obstacles or influences that would make the giving of our message either more or less effective? Well, of course, there's our body language. Now, I know myself that I speak with my hands, and I'm sure others have other types of non-verbal communications that you know are just intuitive to us. The language that we use, whether it's overly complex or not relevant to the people or the persons that we've just been speaking to, as Neil and I demonstrated in the video. The existing knowledge, we might presume that someone knows what we're talking about. How many times have you been in a conversation and you're talking about something and the person is looking very perplexed and puzzled, and they have no idea what you're talking about because you've assumed that they are already au fait with the information that you're portraying. And again, assumptions are a very big part of that. Sometimes, again, have you ever been in a situation, I know myself as when I was very much involved as a ranger and doing interpretation, you know, you're trying to explain something to a group of people, and you assume that they know that this is a particular kind of tree, or they assume already the answer of the information that you haven't yet provided for them. And again, this misinformation, this misconnection of the giver of the information and the receiver of the information exists. The context, again, Neil and I going for our messages is quite a common context for us, but outside of that situation, no one would understand what you're talking about. And if you can't remember the previous conversation or what has gone on before, again, you might feel a bit lost in what this person is trying to communicate to you. And then there's obviously some individual aspects to how you receive information or even how you give information. You know, we all have bad days. We're human beings. We have on days and off days and good days and bad days and tired days and more energetic days. So everything that's happening in our internal landscape affects how we're receiving information around about us. I'm not going to go into every single detail here, but obviously there are particular individual aspects that can influence and be a barrier to receiving and giving information, but there is also the external environment. If it's very noisy, if it's you know, if the way in which the material is presented to you is unfamiliar or difficult. So these are, I mean, this is, you know, very basic stuff, but in fact it's so basic that we forget about it. We forget that you know, we just assume that we're giving out information and that everyone is receiving it, and we forget that there are just human being aspects that can sometimes prohibit that being effective. So why does this matter? Well, it matters in our personal lives. I'm sure you can think of many examples where you've miscommunicated or not understood a piece of communication yourself. But of course, we're really thinking about the professional world and when communication doesn't work properly in your professional life. Now, in a moment, I'm not going to do it right now, I'll do it at the end of the presentation. I'm going to open up another Mentimeter, and it's something I'm just going to leave there in the background for you to consider. It's a different form of Mentimeter, and you'll see when you go in when I give you the code. And I want you to be thinking about now, just let that come to the front of your mind, what happens when communication doesn't work properly? Has there been a situation in your working life where a piece of communication really didn't work. Now, obviously, if it's something really terrible, we won't be sharing it with the wider world. But if there is something you feel you can share with us, it would be very useful to understand that. So I'm going to just leave that in your mind just now. I'll open up the Mentimeter at the end. And over the rest of the session, you can add your comments into that on just sharing an experience of when communication really didn't work properly on your site. Now, obviously, in extreme situations where communication really isn't working in a protected area, then we can really get into conflict situations. We can even get into legal challenges or just a really bad atmosphere in a team or with partners. So yeah, getting our communication right at a basic level, at a basic human interaction level, is really important because it builds on the relationships and the work and the messages that you want to get out about the importance of your nature. I'm just going to take us through just a little definition of some of the types of communications that we might be familiar with, and just a way of ordering that information in our minds. So there's a whole set of communication that we could call informative communication, where the information that's given is usually quite just factual, and hopefully unbiased. And in these days of fake news, it's very hard to tell. So, for example, in our situations, this might be just the factual information on our websites or newsletters, that kind of a thing. It's just informative communication. But also, we're very engaged as human beings, and certainly as protected area managers, with effective communication, because we're not just trying to give people information, we're trying to influence their mood, and we are trying to express something, our passion for our area, our excitement about a new event. So we communicate often effectively through our feelings, our emotions, and we're trying to influence others in that way, to respond in that way. We might also use imaginative communication, and this is particularly relevant in when we come to think about interpretation. We're telling a fictional version of events, and here's an example here: telling jokes to one another, reading novels, plays, watching a film. These are all ways of imaginative communication. There's information there, there's effectiveness there, but it's presented in a non-fictional way. There's also persuasive communication, and I think for us in again the protected area worlds, this is probably something that we're very familiar with. We're presenting and creating all this communication to persuade people to a particular point of view, to engage in a certain set of behaviours. We are trying to change something here. We're trying to persuade people that to do something differently. And again, here's an example of salesperson. They're trying to persuade you to buy the most expensive piece of jewellery in the shop. And finally, there's something called ritualistic communication. You might think, that's not very relevant or important to us, but if you think about situations in your professional life where it's very ordered and very formal communications, and this is often the case in legal situations, or sometimes in with politicians or others, where there's a very strict protocol and you're expected to speak in a particular way, and in social situations to respond and behave in a particular way. And I think all of these different definitions of communications or types of communication are found across our protected area communications. Now, there's different contexts in which we perform these communications. There is of course the intrapersonal. That's pretty much talking to yourself, which sometimes when we're engaged in online discussions, when we can't see people's faces and you just have voices in the mist, I sometimes feel I'm just talking to myself. So intrapersonal communication. This can reveal itself. I know, for example, I write a to-do list every day. That's a form of talking to myself. I'm telling myself what I need to do, and I'm ordering my thoughts in myself. You might do a blog. We've asked you to do a blog for this course. That's a form of intrapersonal communications. Or you might keep a diary. Of course, interpersonal communication is naturally when you're talking to someone else. Small group could be your team, obviously a family situation. And although I've presented the family situation here, I've done that deliberately because quite often when we're trying to create partnerships, we're actually trying to recreate a little bit of a family environment in order that that communication would be more effective. As people respond to that sort of environment. There's organisational context. We are in one now. Your team meetings, other slightly more formal situations. Then, of course, there's public communications. It might be a lecture, a presentation, a speech, a guided walk. These are all forms of public communication. And then, of course, there's mass communication. Newspapers, digital forms, everything we do with our phone these days. So again, it's important and useful for us, I think, to just think about these different contexts of communications and where they take place in our workplaces. And then finally, there's communication media, the things that we use, the tools that we use to get this information across. Now, quite often, it might not even be words. How many times have you been in a piece of communication and someone's just gone, We use different sounds. The pattern of those sounds, the tone of those sounds can reveal a lot about the mood or the acceptance of your communication by another. We use a lot of signs. Here's some signs on a major road in Australia. It's telling you everything you need to know with very little words. I think sometimes we are a little bit too over-wordy. We do use a lot of symbols and gestures, whether they be visuals or like this with our hands. And of course, sign language is an entire language based on that. Then, as we humans evolved, we got a bit more clever and we were able to formulate words. And our first forms of mass communication was when the elders or the priests or the runners who would go from village to village, passing the information on about whatever was interesting or important. It was kind of the Facebook or the Twitter of ancient times. Then we got even cleverer and we started to write down our words. Now, sometimes those words may not have been, or those written forms of communication may not necessarily have been words. They too can be symbols. If you think of Viking runic language, it's very much a symbolic language rather than written alphabetical words. I think even the Russian Cyrillic language is a lot more like that. Then we started to print things, and of course we have many forms of print. Not just in words, but of course graphics too can give information and tell a story. Then electric communications came along, and I put that one in because some people might not even know what that is. That's actually a Morse code instrument for creating Morse code, which again is a type of communication using sounds and patterns of sounds. Of course, we got more clever when telephones and other electric means of communications came along. And then we have broadcast media, like the radio, TV, and of course now digital. So maybe again, just for a very brief moment, I'd like to share screen. I'll just come out of this. Well, I'm still sharing screen, but I need to stop sharing this one. And just very quickly ask you to, I'm going to show you another little tool that we have in Zoom, which is the whiteboard. So this is a whiteboard, just like if we had a flip chart up in the room, and I can write some things on the whiteboard. So very quickly, and this is where I do need you to use your microphones, and you'll have to be a little bit polite with each other, but I'd like you to maybe very quickly, we'll have a very brief brainstorm on different kinds of communication media tools that you're using to present your information in your areas. So just like as if we were in a room with a whiteboard and I was asking you, what kind of communication are you using in your sites across Europe? Open up your mics and give me some ideas.
Yeah, first of all, we are using social media like Facebook, Instagram. So it's for us quite important to share our information quite quickly. And of
social
course,
medias.
yeah, social media and websites. Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Press
Anyone
releases.
Else? Press release. So there's a written form.
Newsletters.
Okay, they're all coming thick and fast now. Newsletters.
Brochures. We use brochures. Signs.
And personal communication.
Mm-hmm.
Is PowerPoint supported presentations?
Oops.
Very common with this.
Yeah.
Also websites.
Yeah, we've used YouTube.
Podcasts.
That's a good one. I might learn something from you then. We want to do a podcast. Podcast. Anything else? Just very quickly, I don't want to spend a lot. I mainly wanted to let you see the tool as well as email. Yeah. It's funny how email has become old school.
Skype.
Skype, yeah. So let's say online. Oops. Eee. So, very quick. You're going to be doing an exercise and a task after the session anyway on this, but I just, first of all, wanted to give you a chance to see another tool that we have in Zoom that you could use as a little online brainstorming exercise. So, that really was just a very brief run through what is the purpose of communication. So just to order our thoughts, again, because we'll be thinking about these different, the purposes of communications, the context of communications, and the media of communications throughout the course. Any questions or thoughts or comments at this point? Because I'm going to take a small pause and move on to the next section of the session this morning. Anything anyone would like to share? No? Okay, fine. I'm going to move on because we all have busy days. So again, this session this morning is in 3 parts. So we've now just dealt with communicating. What's the purpose of communicating? I'm going to move on now to start to introduce some of the tools that we're going to use to develop the purpose of our communication in order that we can hopefully become competent, inclusive communicators. So, communication strategies. Anybody out there have a communication strategy already written up, ready, a plan, and you're in the process of implementing it? Anyone?
Yes, now we are preparing our communication strategy for our organization. So I think this year we will finish it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, in our park, we have a marketing strategy, and as part of it, we have a communication strategy as well.
Again, it's not a prerequisite of the course that you have to have done this. I'm just curious. Of course, in Europark, we also have a communication strategy about everything that we want to communicate as a federation. So I'll maybe reference some of that as I go in. So, okay, I'm going to quickly go into my screen and see if I can find the right one for you. Yep, here we are. So I'm sorry it's very didactic today, but yeah, sometimes it just has to be like that so we can get information over to you. So, part 2. We've dealt with communicating with purpose. What was the purpose of communication? What is a communication strategy now? So, communication strategies. Love them or loathe them. Does it matter what we say and to whom, when, how? Yeah, I think it does. I think it would make us more effective if we order and consider the information that we want to present about our park, about our organization or whatever it is, in order to make sure that the messages that we're trying to present reach the target that we want to do and that the change that we're seeking happens. And as I mentioned just earlier, and I'm going to, oh yes, I said I would open up the Mentimeter. I'll do that just in a minute. Yeah, when everything's going great, yeah, fine. But unfortunately, or as we know in the real world of protected area management, problems with communication do arise. And it means that we're not being effective in what it is we're trying to protect. And the people with whom we're working can become alienated from that purpose. So it's important that our communication is coordinated. So, as I said, they're coordinating about what you say, to whom, when, and in what way are all important elements of a communication strategy. It's also very important that the messages that you're giving out as an organization are consistent. So we don't have different parts of the organisation giving out different messages which contradict one another. Is it any wonder that the public are surprised? I'll give you one example from my personal experience. I used to be a ranger, and I used to be a manager of a protected area in Scotland. And we had an area that was important for wading birds, well, for ducks and other, the small loch, the small water body. And it was an area where we would often take school children to do pond dipping, you know, to see what kind of animals are living in the water. But around this same small wetland area was a small fence and some signs going, please do not cross this fence, because obviously we don't want you to disturb the wildlife, and neither do we want you to, you know, for safety reasons. Yet, every year we would take school children to this area. We would step over the small fence, and we would allow them to go there to examine the small animals that they found there. And eventually I came to realise that we were contradicting our own messages. We were putting messages up about safety and about not disturbing the wildlife, yet somehow when you were in the presence of a ranger, it was okay. Now, sometimes that is okay, but in this particular situation, we felt that yeah, we were giving out a very inconsistent and contradictory message to the people that we were engaged with, and we just stopped that practice. It had to be one thing or the other. It was either okay to go to the wetland to do this, or it was unsafe and you were disturbing the wildlife. And we eventually found another location that was less disturbing, that was safe, also safer for the children, and more consistent in our messages. So that's just one example of how being inconsistent and uncoordinated is ineffective in your communications. We can unpick that example at length, I'm sure, later on, but that's certainly from my own experience. It's something that I really, and I changed our own practice as a result. So I'm going to show you now just one model of communication strategies, and this is essentially the model that we're going to follow through the modules. It's only one type of planning for making a communication strategy. You may have others, but as I say, it's the one that we're going to follow. We're going to take you through these elements of the strategy, looking at the history of what you've done, setting objectives for your future communications, who are the audience, what are the channels and tools that we're going to use to present our information, how are we going to implement that, you know, how are we actually going to action the things that we're hoping to do, and then how are we going to evaluate what we've done to make sure that it's been effective. And central to all of that are, of course, you and your skills and your abilities to do all of this, and using those range of skills, some of which we just talked about in the previous presentation. So I'm very quickly, I'm not going to go through this in detail, I'm just very quickly going to touch on each of these areas, because as I say, this is essentially the rest of the course. So looking at the history, where are you now? What have you already done? What is the status of your organisation or your park or your Natura 2000 site now? What is the current state that, and you know, what information do you want to tell about that? So we need to know what you've already done. You need to know what you've achieved. You need to know how effective have the communications that you've previously been doing. Because remember, I said some of the barriers and obstacles to communications is the history, is the context. And if you're coming into a situation to try and tell somebody about some aspect of the Natura 2000 side of the park, and there's what we call, there's history there, there's been some previous interactions that perhaps were less constructive, then you need to understand that in order to build on that. So just understanding that history is useful both for an individual project, for an individual piece of communication, or a whole campaign about something that you're needing to do in your park. So we need to make sure that we set objectives that hit the target. What exactly is it we're trying to say here, to whom, and about what? Now again, we're going to go into this in a lot more detail in future modules, but setting those objectives will also lead us to creating messages about the stories you want to tell about this place. And also to understand, are we just giving information here? Or are we actually trying to educate people or precipitate a change in their behaviour. And that's important to understand at the beginning, because it will change how we present the information. I'm sure you're all familiar, if we've all been writing projects for eons, then we'll all have some understanding, good or bad, about SMART or smarter objectives that need to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timed, evaluated and reviewed. If only all objectives were like that. I think if you get some of that written into your objective, I think you're doing well. But bearing in mind, any objectives we write for communication need to be linked back to the bigger organisation. Like I said, in Europark, we have a communication strategy, but that needs to be linked to the overall strategy of what we're trying to achieve as an organisation. You know, we can't just go off and decide we're going to communicate. Our priority in communicating is X, but in fact, the priority of the organisation as a whole is Y. So making sure that what we're saying in the communication strategy is clearly linked to the, let's say, the meta framework of the organisation as a whole. Of course, that leads us on to our audience. Who are we talking to, and what do we know about them? What, you know, information do we need to know about the audience in order to design the right tools and channels to reach them? You might think flying an aeroplane with a message across the sky is a very effective form of communication, and it may very well work for some people. But is it appropriate for the audience that you're actually trying to talk to? How do we really effectively reach those people that we need to get some information across to? And of course, we actually need to make some actions to make all of this happen. It's all very well writing down a great plan, but you know, at some point you actually have to go and communicate and create some real communications. And everything that you'll have considered through the history, the objectives, the audience and the tool will lead you to choose the actual form of communication that you eventually decide upon. Hence why we chose the videos that you've been watching for this course, because we felt that that was the appropriate implementation technique for what it is we are trying to present to you. Of course, it is important to evaluate what we've done. Did it actually work? Did the people receive the message that we sent? Has the behaviour actually changed? So there's whole sets of different forms of evaluation in order to figure that out. Sometimes just asking people what they learned, what they now know, what has changed, you know, there's no harm in doing that. So this is the process that we are going to take you through over the next few weeks. And embedded, I think as we said at the introductory to the course, embedded in each of these modules is what we call personal competencies. I'm just going to skip through this. So you and your skills are the personal competencies, and we'll sneak, you're going to get one today, we'll sneak these into each of the modules. So just so you know, looking ahead, all of this will come into every module, but specifically we're going to be looking at writing objectives, particularly in communicating to inspire, looking at interpretation, communication for impact with Neil, we're looking more at technical objective writing. Identifying the audience, well, got a couple of weeks' time with Teresa, looking at who are the stakeholders and identifying them. Looking through all the different types of channels and tools that you could possibly use will be with Barbara. And yeah. Module 4 is going to be quite heavy, so be prepared that week. Communication for impact really covers quite a lot of this. But as I said, most of these elements of this process appear throughout the course. Of course, as I said earlier, the personal communication competencies are sneaked in throughout the modules. So that's the basic structure of how to create a communication strategy. And as I said, over the next 7 weeks or so, we will go into each of these elements in more detail. Okay. That was part 2 of this morning's session. Any comments or thoughts on that? I'm going to, whilst you're thinking, I'm going to open up the Mentimeter. So any comments on communication strategy? Did that make sense to you? Is it a process you're familiar with? If you could just make some thoughts on that. And as I say, I'll just open up the Mentimeter. It's very quiet out there. Or you're writing, are you?
No, Tim's saying lots of stuff to reflect on, and
Sure.
indeed there is.
Where's my number? 52, 28, 61. 52.
And of course, maybe just to add to what Tim said as well, not only lots of stuff to reflect on in terms of the principles and the purposes involved, but also in terms of your local contexts, you know, because your communication strategy might be good for your organization, your protected area, your Natura 2000 site, but that need not necessarily work for another protected area, another organization, another Natura 2000 site. So it'll be interesting to see what evolves for each of you, because as we said on Monday, we really want this course and your time investments in this course to yield a product, a benefit that you can actually use and help you in your daily work. So indeed, a lot to think about, but that's why we wanted in Module 1 to start that ball rolling, because this is the thread that we will continue to develop. You will continue to develop as the modules are delivered. And ultimately, that'll lead up to a final assignment. But don't worry about the final assignment just now, but we'll come to that in due course.
Again, we sure.
Yeah, thanks. So I just work here for 6 months, and I was just curious about the history part. Like, how is it better to dig deep on that? Because sometimes that might be subjective. So if you ask someone from the administration, maybe they see another point of view than the communities see. So what is the best point to find that out?
Well, if there hasn't been any actual evaluation done, so you don't have, you know, any objective information to go on, then of course you need to get a range of opinions that would inform, you know, a more complete picture of what has happened previous. Yes, of course it is important to have an understanding of what has gone on before, but I wouldn't let that hold you back from doing something. You need to, the most important thing about communications is to do it. You've got to start from somewhere. If you're going to wait until you think you know everything about everybody and everything that's gone on before, then it will inhibit your progress. So yes, for the want of a comprehensive evaluation, at least, you know, try and gain a range of opinions from those who have done the communicating and those who have received the communication on their understanding of what that was all about, to at least inform what you think needs to do going forward. But this is what the forum is for as well. Please feel free to post your questions in the forum. Neil and I are monitoring that all week. Nobody's actually posted any questions yet, so note to all, please do that. But if you've got a question out there that the rest could input into, please put it in the forum and start that conversation. So if anyone else has got any thoughts to advise or help Timea with that issue, please. We don't have a lot of time to discuss it here in the meeting, but please also please remember to put that in the forum. But Mate, if you just had something very quick you wanted to say,
yeah, just quick one example. I was making communication strategy for this year before a few weeks, and actually I started writing some things down, but then I had this conclusion that, for example, visual identity is already created, you know, and if I try to implement some new elements, it's not relevant for this strategy. So this is, if you connect it with history, you should really try to identify past activities and what's already done, and then you will get wider picture, right?
Good.
Good, thanks. Again, please use the forum. That's a great place to, you know, to throw out some ideas or offer some some solutions. Okay, we said about an hour and 15 minutes, so I am conscious of the time and I don't want to eat much more of your time. I have a very final, very brief presentation to give. But before we do that, because that's really the end of the introduction to the communication with purpose module. And as I said, we like to sneak in a little module on personal communications. And I mentioned that right at the beginning as one of those elements that you need to be effective in your communications. And certainly not just to be effective, but can in itself be a barrier or an obstacle to positive and effective communications. So we have another couple of minutes break where we can step out of the Zoom room momentarily and go into the Moodle. And you can see there the second video of the day. It's only a couple of minutes long. And that really is the introduction to personal communications and what we're going to share with you over the next wee while. So if you could take a minute to watch that video, and yeah, again, look forward to hearing your comments at the end. So if you could watch the second video on personal communication competencies. Again, if you can just signal that you've seen the video, just so I know that we're all finished. I have no idea who that weather person is, as you can imagine.
You should really tell us what kind of tool are you using?
Oh yes.
Secrets, trade secrets.
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you know what to do, if people are really, we don't have time to cover that in today, but you've all asked questions about it, so you know, just Skype Neil and I, or you know, ask for a little meeting or something like that, and we'll happily explain it to you. As I say, we hadn't anticipated to explain the tool. Maybe Barbara can do that in her module when you explain about tools that we've used. But yeah, all we can say is that we had good fun doing it. That's certainly part of it. But as with all pieces of communication, preparation, preparation, preparation. So what you see in the 2 minutes there is hours and days of work that go into the thinking about that, or in my case, half an hour before we were due to film that. And also, if I may say, I'm very proud of the fact that that was done in one take. I did that in one take because I knew I had to do it and my colleagues hadn't seen it before either, so I just had to do it quickly. Otherwise, you overthink it. So I just did it, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you got the point that what I was trying to say there is that I'm just explaining the different kinds of personal communications that we need to be thinking about that affect how effective our communications might be. So I hope you enjoyed that. A little bit of fun there. Sorry again about the very last PowerPoint presentation today. It's just very quick, but there is going to be a little bit of fun in the middle of this, so do keep your eyes open. So I'll just go into the very last communication thing of the day. So this is the first of your mini modules on personal communications, and the one that we're going to address for us in this module is non-verbal communication. So the different ways in which non-verbal communication can affect our ability to communicate our messages. And as you can see, in particular, I have a very particular non-verbal communication style. So we mentioned just earlier this morning about the different types of communication, and we spoke especially about informative and affective communication, because when we're trying to either understand a piece of communication or indeed receive a piece of communication, the words that are spoken in particular when we're dealing with face-to-face communication are only a small part of the story. In order to understand fully what someone is trying to say to us, we need to also pick up on the other signals that they're giving. We need to see and feel what is being said, because only 7% of the meaning of what we're trying to communicate is in the words that we speak. 38, a large proportion of what we're trying to say is what is called the paralinguistic language, and that's everything else. The way my face is, my hands, my body posture, everything that's non-verbal, and of course half of it is your facial expressions. So we need to consider, in terms of non-verbal communications, our facial expressions, our touch, whether that's appropriate or inappropriate, or whether it's culturally acceptable, our body orientation and posture. Are we looking attentively to the person that we're speaking to, or are we being defensive? Your appearance, just how you look and how you present yourself, immediately is forming, people are forming an impression about you. Your eye contact, how close or far away you are from that person, and of course, in my case, the hand gestures. So there are some very common facial expressions that are common to every culture and every context. So there are 6 universal emotions. And as it happens, I have a very compliant assistant with me today, who I hope will now present to you. So I want you to look very carefully at Neil and at his camera, his webcam, because Neil is going to demonstrate for you one of the 6 universal emotions, and I would like you to guess which one you think he is portraying. So everyone watch.
You all see me?
He's not portraying one now, but tell us when you've started.
Do my deadpan.
Okay.
I'll just go with the first one first.
I'll do that again. Yeah. So, can you write in the chat box what you think Neil, what emotion is Neil portraying there?
Test my acting skills. Yeah.
Surprise. Yeah, excellent. Very good. So, another of the universal emotions, Neil?
I'm only doing them twice.
Shock, fear.
Shooked. I like shooked.
No, we don't worry about your spelling. You've not seen my spelling. It's terrible. So. Fear.
Well, most got it. Most got it.
Right.
Actually, Timea.
That was fear then, Neil?
That was fear.
Yep. And finally, another one. Oh, finally, your third one. What could that be? Sad? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we're all
I'm a great actor.
we're all keying into the sad face. Okay, another one, Neil.
Oh, see, you guys are naturals. You know.
Super happy. And number 5. Mm-hmm.
Very good, Mickey.
Yep. Pissed off.
No, that's just
no,
you.
No, that's quite a different face, Michael.
Yeah, that's just you. Leave me alone.
Disgust. And the final one?
I did a wee sound effect there. So.
Yeah, angry. Great. Well done, Neil.
Well done, you guys.
Actually, I think when it's the deaf language, I think you do this when you don't have sound. Yeah. So back to the slides. My slides are through. So there you are. Anger, happiness, surprise, disgust, sadness, and fear are the universal emotions. And again, there's a whole science on which muscles are being used and all the rest of it across every culture. These are, of course, quite extremes. There are nuances and little bit, not quite so happy, a little bit sad, not so angry, that we use in everyday life. But these are the main universal emotions. And it's useful for you as good communicators, first of all, to be able to pick up on those emotions that are in the room as you're speaking to people or presenting to them, or indeed how you leak those emotions out in your own communications. Just quickly moving on to the other non-verbal means of communication, eye contact, of course. When we're looking at someone, which is a little bit hard to do when in this medium, I have to say, I'm sort of just glancing over all of you. Eye contact shows that you're interested in the topic that the person is speaking to you about, or indeed that you're attracted to that person. And you certainly look more frequently when you are interested in the topic that the person is addressing. But of course, staring at somebody goes the other way and becomes a little bit scary and unnerving. So too much staring, too much eye contact can be just as bad. We all have an interpersonal distance, and again, this can be culturally this can be different in different cultures. So that's the bubble that we like to have around us in terms of closeness of other people. Sometimes, as I say, it is culturally is affected by different cultures, but also by you as a person and your own personal needs. And not that I'm suggesting that you go about your business with a ruler in your hand just to make sure that people are at the right distance, but generally speaking, normally most of us, for our intimate friends and family, we can have people almost touching us, less than 45 centimeters away from us. Personal zone, people that you're familiar with, friends, about an arm's length away or a little bit closer. The social zone, this is possibly where most of us are in when we're at a networking event or in a meeting, maybe about a meter or so away. We're a bit more used to speaking to people at that distance, but I suggest you try this in your offices over the course of the day and see how close you can get to some of your colleagues, see where their personal zone is, And of course, there's the public zone when you're speaking at a more public event or leading a meeting. But again, I'm not suggesting you go around with a ruler just to make sure people are at the right distance, but just to be aware of that when you're leading a piece of communication, or you're in a meeting, or you're engaging with a new partner, just to be aware that either you're not invading their space, or indeed they're invading yours. But of course, circumstances means that sometimes these distances are forced upon us when we're in a lift or a train or other circumstances. And as human beings, we immediately start to do things that tries to increase that distance because we're just not comfortable with it, which is, again, using our non-verbal signals to show that we're not comfortable, either by turning away or body language or avoiding eye contact. So be aware of that. If there are people in the room who are exhibiting some of these behaviours, it might not just be because what you're saying they don't agree with. It might be actually because there's some situation in the room that's making them uncomfortable. Another of those non-verbal communications that we do all the time is just, as I say, our body posture can indicate very many different things. We could be, angry or defensive, feeling uncomfortable in some way, or we're actually interested in the subject, or we're tense or shy or embarrassed or uncomfortable in some way, and our body language is revealing that. As I said earlier, we tend to turn towards people that we're interested in, and we tend to turn away from those we dislike, or, as I say, that are presenting something uncomfortable to us. So these are all just things to be aware of when you're holding a meeting, when you've got a stakeholder engagement situation. Before you even start communicating, what is the mood of the room? How are you interpreting how people are presenting themselves and feeling? Again, hand gestures, you know me already, my hands do the talking. But just be aware, these are also culturally dependent. So what might seem like an innocent hand gesture to you in your culture might actually be very offensive to somebody else in the room. And it's just to be aware of that. And of course, not all hand gestures are welcoming and friendly. Some are actually a lot less so. Then there's the whole paralanguage. I mentioned this briefly at the beginning. That's everything else that we are leaking out of ourselves. So not just what we're saying, how we're saying it, the pitch of our voice, the speed at which we're talking, the emotion that's in our voice. But also sometimes when, particularly in a more public situation, we might not always be very consistent in how we use ers and ems and interruptions and ways of speaking that are revealing a little bit about ourselves, and maybe we're anxious or we're nervous, but we also need to be aware of, because they're impeding our means of being effective in our communication. If we're speaking really, really fast, we're either incredibly excited or incredibly nervous. And people can make an assumption that if you're speaking very slowly, that you're not really understanding. I'm not saying that that's true, but that is an assumption that's, again, a generalization in people's perceptions. Interruptions, especially in a small group or in a interpersonal communication, is normal to break into the conversation. It's not a monologue. Well, it is right now, but too much interruption can be detrimental to the flow of the conversation. And there are very clear gender differences on how women interrupt or come into a conversation and how men do it. And again, we'll talk about all of these things in a lot more detail later on, but just to be aware of that. And immediately it's putting those obstacles and barriers in place that's impeding your communications. Now, I'm going to put a video onto the Moodle after the session, and you can just watch it at your leisure. Hopefully the link will work, and it's just a 2 or 3 minute video, and it takes you through that paralanguage and with some examples of it. Okay, how you look. We make, as I just said earlier, we make instant judgments on how something about that person just based on their appearance. Now, it could be very much a uniform. A park ranger in their uniform is already giving out information about themselves and who they are and what it is they're doing before they even say a word. Just as soon as they walk into the room, people are making assumptions about that person because of the way in which they are dressed or the uniform that they're wearing. And that works both ways. People can also make assumptions about you and about the value of what it is you're going to communicate with them based on your appearance. Now, I'm not saying that we have a dress code for this course at all, not at all, but just be aware of that in terms of what it is, how you need to present yourselves, and if that's an impediment to your communications, depending on who you're speaking to and the audience that you're going to, you need to dress accordingly. Just in summary, pull this together. These are all the non-verbal communications that we're using all the time. Our facial expressions, our eye contact, our interpersonal distance, our appearance, our hand gestures, they all make a difference to your communication. So it's just about bringing these aspects to the front of your mind so that you can address these things for you as a communicator, but also that you can read the situation from those with whom you are communicating. And we do this naturally, we all have a natural default. But sometimes we do have to fake it. Sometimes if you are very nervous in a situation, if you're aware that the speed of your speech is going faster, you do need to just be aware of that and bring that back down. If you feel that your hand gestures are just too much for people, then you need to kind of just bring that down. So part of being a good communicator is filtering yourself sometimes in order to make the best of the communication that you're giving. So although I'm saying fake it if you have to, at the end of the day, most of us as human beings relate better to authenticity. We know when someone is being real, when they're being honest, when they're being truthful in their communications. So sometimes I say we might just need to pull ourselves in a little bit to get the best out of our communications. Okay, so that was the first of your personal communication competencies. Again, you hear us saying this often, we will follow these up throughout the course, and certainly when we get to Kullaberg in June for our face-to-face meeting, we will revise a lot of these, because there's a lot of exercises that we can do when we're actually in the same place and at the same time. Okay, so if you're still taking part in the other Mentimeter, that's fine. I've left that open. I really will be interested to hear your experiences of times when your communications has not worked properly. But just to bring our meeting this morning to a conclusion, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of 5 minutes or so over here. Again, final Mentimeter of the day. And again, we're showing you these both as a tool for us to use inside this session, but for you to learn how to use the tool and for you to be able to consider how you might use it in your different situations. So for the last Mentimeter of the day, I'm going to give you the last number that you need to put in. I'm just opening it now. So for the last Mentimeter, I need you to put in the code 628301. Neil, could you put that in the chat for me, please? Because I'm going to open up the presentation so that you can see it live this time. So this time we're going to create a word cloud. 628301. Hopefully. Has everybody found it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll hopefully see the words coming up soon. I'll just go back, make sure it's working.
But what's the question, Carol?
Oh, sorry. I thought I'd done that. Hold on, let me just go in and sort this. I wrote this earlier, but I've obviously not. Give me 1 second, sorry. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. Okay. Does it come up now?
No, you might need to go out and go back in.
Oh, sorry.
Or you could put the question just in the chat.
Yep. I need to put it in the word cloud so it comes up. Yeah, see, not everything goes exactly to plan.
Here's the question now.
Sorry,
What do you need to be more effective in your communications? That's Carol type script.
In your communications.
So the question is, what do you need to be more effective in your communications?
Good one. Hopefully now you'll start to see the word cloud forming on the screen. So someone's written confident, which is great. That's a fantastic. Oh, sorry, communications. I do apologise for my typing. The one that I prepared earlier must have just got lost in the ether. Consistent, good word. So for those of you who may or may not know how a word cloud works, the more people that write the same word, the bigger that word becomes, and you'll start to see the authentic. Excellent. Yeah, really good word. Preparation, preparation, preparation. Talk louder. I think I need to talk less. Body language, yeah. Purpose, yeah. Thank you for pulling the whole session this morning together by using that word. 10 people, is that everyone? I think you had three opportunities, so you could write three times. So if you had 3 needs, you could write 3: inspiration, wisdom, balance, listening. Very good. Contact.
I think that's.
I like this. Excellent. No, very, very good. That's some great insights there. So I really appreciate that. So I say I will keep the other Mentimeter open if people are still thinking about a communication experience that didn't go quite as well in your work. And I will capture all of these presentations and make sure that the results of them are in your Moodle just shortly before I have to drive up to Aberdeen. So we said about 1 hour and 20. Oh, we've just made it into 1 hour and a half. I hope that's been an interesting morning for you. We certainly were aware that today was going to be quite full because we wanted to get all those foundation aspects into the beginnings of our communications courses, and my colleagues Teresa, Neil and Barbara will be building on this work over the next few weeks. So I am putting a little exercise onto the wiki again for you to complete, and we'll try and find out what happened to the one that should have been on Monday.
Yep, we're on that one. So
yeah, we'll give you some. We'll give you.
But it's now unhidden.
Yeah. So yeah. Apologies for that. As I say, Neil and I said to you on Monday, we're learning how to do this at the same time. So please bear with us if we don't get everything 100% right. So, so again, I hope there's the word cloud for you, and I will put that on the Moodle shortly. But again, just to say thank you again for your time this morning. It was a little bit longer than normal. We wouldn't normally go, or this is about as long as we would normally go. If you haven't already done so, please register for the webinar on Friday with Dirk. I'm looking forward to that myself. Be nice to be able to sit back and listen for a change. And I look forward to meeting up with you in the weeks to come. I will see you next. My next module to really present to you is interpretation. And I'm going to be handing over to Teresa in 2 weeks' time, who will be doing module number 2, and then onwards with Barbara and Neil thereafter. So I think you've got some homework to do. You've got some, you can rewatch the videos. Please feel free to share those videos with your colleagues and friends. They're now public, so you're happy for them to certainly see the introductory video ones. And yeah, please post your questions, your thoughts, your comments, your sharing of ideas on the forums too. So unless Neil, you have anything to add?
No, I'm just putting a wee message in chat, but basically there were an awful lot of really good comments and exchanges in the chat. So I've done my best to try and filter those, so I'll put them into the forum because I think that's a more logical platform to share that in. But thanks, Carol, because you won Presenter of the Year with your weather girl. So.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Martina, you were asking about module 2. If it's not already on the events calendar in the Moodle, we will be putting them on just shortly. I think, as Neil explained on Monday, we generally don't put all the details of the module on the Moodle until about the week before. So that'll be coming up soon. But if you do have any questions and you need to make sure your time is banked, first of all, please check the calendar. We've usually put all the live events on the calendar. If not, please feel free to contact us and we'll let you have some information in advance.
Yeah, definitely the sort of schedule events for module 2 have been confirmed. They're in the calendar. So. Okay,
everyone. Have a good day. Have a good next couple of days. We'll see you in the webinar on Friday, and I look forward to having your tasks and chatting with you in the forum. Okay, thanks again for listening.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.